So good evening and thanks for joining us virtually tonight. I'm Samantha Briggs, the Director of Communication for Widefield School District 3. I'd like to start with brief introductions as we kind of go around our grid here. So we have Mr. Kevin Duran, is currently the Executive Director of Secondary Education, but starting in June, will be taking over as Superintendent of Schools as Mr. Scott Campbell is retiring this school year. We have Mr. Kirk Sateka, currently the Executive Director of Human Resources and the incoming Assistant Superintendent. He is taking over for Mr. Joe Garrett, who is also retiring this school year. Mrs. Connie Florell is our Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Education. Mrs. Jen Sanchez Mason is currently our Assistant Director of Human Resources and our incoming Equity Director. Mr. Carlos Gonzalez is a member of our Widefield Board of Education. And it is our pleasure to have with us tonight Mezrav, Fannie Lee, and Vance, who are with the American Institutes of Research, or AIR, and Dr. Regina Lewis, who is with Regina Speaking, and you will hear from them in just a few moments. If you have any questions as we go through this presentation this evening, please feel free to email info, that's INFO, at wsd3.org, and we will try to get to those questions at the end of our presentation. Mr. Duran will be starting us off this evening with a little background of why we are on this equity journey.
Thank you, Ms. Briggs, and welcome everyone. This is our first inaugural town hall meeting, and I'm sure we'll have many more times like this, but please be patient with us if it doesn't work, or we're just happy for you to be here and joining in on this conversation. I want to give you just a brief background and an overview of where we are at and how we got here. So more than a year ago, our district began pointed and targeted conversations around equity. It was really prompted by some of our data. I'm not sure if you know, but in January, the state releases data on graduation rates, attendance rates, dropout rates, along with a lot of different data that we look at through the course of the year. And we take that information and we present it to the board in February. Last year, we noticed a continued trend in some of our schools, which led us to dig deeper into our data to see if those trends are consistent with other areas of such as discipline, or can we triangulate some of that data to look at, are they consistent with some of the same things we see with SAT and ACT? And we found disparities. We found disparities in things that we could not ignore, we couldn't shy away from, and it really invigorated the discussions and the conversations that much more. And so our board began conversations and with us and us with them about really doing some good work around equity and how we can make change and increase student achievement and close some of those disparity gaps, achievement gaps, and things that we were seeing within our data. That was in February of 2020. And if you were familiar with what happened in March of 2020, the pandemic hit. And that changed all of our conversations to really be focused on pandemic recovery. And so the conversations around how we could best equip our students to be successful kind of was put on hold. But the issues around equity never went away. As a matter of fact, the pandemic really brought forward several areas of equity or inequities that we started to see even more of within our community, such as internet access, technology, food insecurities, just the differences of what our community is looking like between the resources that our families need just to be successful on a day-to-day basis. And we know that learning doesn't happen if we can't, or if we're not able to meet the needs or the basic needs of our students. We knew that we need to take those initial conversations and put them into action. And with the support of our Board of Education, we put out a request for proposal, or RFP, to have an outside agency do an equity audit on the district. And it was important for us to have an outside agency do this work for transparency, to provide a forum for parents, for students, for our staff, to give open and honest feedback so that we can know what direction we need to go and where our hot spots of concerns really are within our district. After a thorough intentional review, the district partnered with AIR, that's the American Institute of Research, and at the same time, we began a culturally responsive training for all staff and board members in the district. So before you hear from both AIR and Dr. Lewis, our board member, Mr. Carlos Gonzalez, I would like to invite him to say just a few words to share with you. So Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Kevin. Hello, everyone, and thanks for everyone that's joining and watching this first town hall. I just wanted to say our entire board agreed and approved the decision to move forward with this process. This wasn't a last minute decision. It wasn't made in a vacuum. We decided that it needed to be done. We want to be more responsive to our community's needs because the more we know, the better off we'll be, just quite frankly. All 5 of us on the board have been involved in this process, taking time to look over, the consulting proposals, asking questions, and being very intentional with bringing in a third party to help us see our blind spots. We see the meaningful work that is being done to improve our school district, and we fully support our district leaders. I'm definitely behind you, Kevin.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. We appreciate you being here this evening. And now we'd like to have our Air Equity consultants step in and give their presentation.
Hello and good evening, everyone. We can start by introducing ourselves. Maybe Fimi. My name is Mezrav. I'm a consultant at the American Institutes for Research. I co-lead the audit work with my colleague Fimi Vance and Fannie Lee, who is here as well. My work at AIR focuses exclusively on issues of equity in education, and particularly in these issues of identifying policy drivers of inequality. And we do work audits, work on diversifying the teacher workforce, addressing chronic shortages across the country. And I'm very happy to be working with Wildfield. We get to learn more and more about the district, and it's a wonderful journey, and I'm glad that the district is taking this initiative. Fimi, you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Fannie Vance. I'm a researcher at the American Institutes for Research. I am based in San Diego, and at AIR, I do both training and research and evaluation. My areas of expertise really around youth development in out of school time, as well as equity and social emotional learning. As Itai said, I'm co-leading this. I'm very excited. Always, I come with this with a deep commitment and an open mind to hear what everyone is experiencing, so that together we can, make stronger education and more equitable outcomes for everyone.
Hi, my name is Fannie Lee. I'm a project specialist at AIR. I'm outside of Tacoma, Washington. I work with a lot of schools and districts on their needs assessments, and I provide technical assistance in helping with communities of practice and also working on STEM-related projects. And I'll be helping project manage this project, and I also helped with some of the focus groups. Glad to be here tonight.
Okay, sorry, was I muted? Can you hear me now? Yeah. Thank you, Femi and Fimi and Fanny. Before I start to go through the slides, maybe I'll say one thing general that's not just true for Whitefield, but true for wherever we do this work. We're working under the it's not an assumption, under the knowledge that is substantiated by research of decades that race-based inequality is not natural. We know that talent is distributed equally, and that whenever we see gaps that have to do with somebody's background or race or income level, that is a product solely of life experiences. Some of those disparities are driven by aspects that may not be in the school system's control. For example, the school system cannot by itself fix poverty or issues of housing segregation. But much of that inequality is driven by educational policies that are discriminatory, oftentimes unintentionally. And that is why, or that is the motivation for doing a comprehensive audit in a project similar to the project we're doing here, to try and uncover what are the things that we're doing on our day-to-day that may unintentionally contribute to the inequality that we're experiencing in our district. What AIR brings to this work, I'm looking at the right side here of this slide, is 75 years of research on this very issue, the educational policy drivers of inequality. That also is my own personal research focus. What is it that we're doing that may unintentionally manufacture differences between students that shouldn't have any differences between them, that are based on where they're from or their background? And we've worked with districts and state across the country to uncover those issues, and we're bringing that knowledge to our review here that we're doing together with Whitefield. But one thing we know is that the two places are never the same when it comes to education. And local context would always be critical in understanding what is happening in a given district. And that's why bringing the research is not enough. And we don't believe in an audit process that AIR would come and just, develop a report and send it to the district and now do whatever you want with that report. We don't think that's a constructive process. Instead, we're building a process where the goal is developing an implementation plan, a feasible implementation plan, not a utopian plan that's going to eliminate all of the gaps in 1 or 2 years, but a plan of things that we know that the district can do considering its budgetary, political, administrative circumstances, that can get behind tomorrow and implement strategies that we think can be associated with the elimination of inequality or inequities in the district. And in order to do that, we implement this process called co-interpretation, where instead of delivering this polished report, we're going to bring raw data that we've analyzed and visualized and made accessible and friendly to people who are going to interpret it, but still raw data, and use a group of stakeholders from the districts that will include district leaders and teachers and school leaders and assistant principals and students and parents and community members, maybe union, that would look at the information and interpret it together with the facilitation of AIR. So that instead of researchers or experts somewhere that would look at the data and make sense of it, the community is going to make sense of it together. In a sense, you are auditing yourself with the support and facilitation of AIR. We believe that by doing that, we can get that local context, but also we can tap into key stakeholders and leaders in the community in this very early stage and think from this point about the implementation that would follow, and try to recruit a large group of committed stakeholders to truly make a difference, to have this project not be another project, but to be a pivotal moment, particularly for those families, for those students who are currently not being served as they should, and that deserve better experience in our schools. And that's really the approach that we're taking, this balance between what research says are the drivers of inequality and what you can teach us in terms of your local context and your experiences in the district. Based on the research, we have identified several areas that we will be looking at as part of this of this audit. This includes an equity-focused student achievement data. It's an analysis of the state assessment. You might have seen the state assessment many times before, but the way we're looking at it is different. We're not looking at average achievement. We're not looking at average growth. We're looking at differences. And particularly, we're looking to see whether differences in Whitefield are driven between schools or within them, or in a combination. Are we seeing different experience for students within the same building, or are we seeing big disparities between buildings in the district? And that will help us think about the strategies we want to take. We're looking at disproportionalities in the assignment to gifted and talented programs, special education, English learner, discipline. We're looking at fiscal data and trying to determine whether need plays a sufficient factor in determining the resource allocation to each school. We're doing an analysis of the diversity of the teaching workforce and also an analysis of access to good teachers, who gets to be taught by the best teachers in the district. We're conducting focus groups, student, parent, and staff focus group about a range of issues. And then we're also reviewing some documents. We're mostly looking at outcomes, not at policies. Policies would come later, mostly looking at what actually happens, not what we're intending to happen. But there's some review of policies as well as part of this work. So a wide range of data sources and experiences that we're trying to get at. And then we will bring all of that to the community to do that process of co-interpretation and make sense of that. Let me hand it to Fimi. Fimi, you want to take us through the process and where we are right now?
Yeah. I appreciated Itai being able to give you a sense of our overall approach. And looking at the audit process, you can get a better sense of the nuts and bolts of what's going to happen. So the way in which AIR conducts an audit process, we break it up into 5 large areas, right? We start with planning, which is really just making sure between our team and your all's team that we have the infrastructure we need to make sure we're doing the project management stuff that's going to make sure it's going smoothly. Those are things like ongoing communication, the ways in which we're going to involve community members, and at what points we're going to do that. And then we move into data collection, which this is where we are right now. Many of the data sources that Itai just talked about, we already have them, or we are in the process of collecting them. Just last week, we started focus groups, and we're continuing on with focus groups this week. And then we'll go into co-interpretation, which Itai really talked about and explained. I just want to re-emphasize, the point is not for us to be able to explore the data. It really is an opportunity for engagement across the community members, across school members, to look at the data that reflects what's going on and draw some really strong conclusions about where we can make tweaks in order to bring more equity within the district. AIR will produce a findings report, but that findings report, again, isn't something that we're creating. We're reporting out from co-interpretation what we heard from stakeholders, and then using research-based to bring in some strategies that we think are going to be feasible for D3 and also effective. And then we go into implementation planning, which is really a document that lays out the next steps that we'll take in the district, really drawing on the strategies that will be in that findings report. One thing I really wanted to, I wanted to note is that throughout the audit process, we have a steering committee, and that steering committee, we're going to be consulting at each stage in this process. And as Itai mentioned, we bring to this work really strong knowledge base of the research, how to do this process effectively, but we need to lean on people that know D3 well, and the steering committee are representatives that we hope know the community well, and we can lean on their knowledge to help guide us to make sure that we're tailoring the process to fit D3, not that we want something cookie cutter, right? We want to make sure that this process is going to be effective and useful and valuable for the D3 community. Okay, thanks. And just to give you a really high level view of the timeline for this, we are now in March, which is, we're right on target doing our data collection. As you'll see, we've already gone through our planning. By the end of May, we'll be moving into co-interpretation and getting out that recommended strategies and findings report. And then by June, we'll have some really strong implementation planning, and may even be thinking about already taking some of the steps that we identified in the implementation plan.
One thing I like to add as well is on this issue of implementation planning. Planning how we're going to implement the strategies in some ways even more important for us in the process than choosing the strategies themselves. And the reason I'm saying that is that many times we do everything right. We analyze the data, we do the research, we find the problems, we find the root cause, we choose the appropriate strategies. But then when we go to implement those strategies, we implement them in a way that caters to the needs of schools that are already doing well. We make some assumptions about what it takes to be ready to implement that strategy. Do you have readiness? Do you not? We're not going to take those assumptions. In fact, we're going to craft the strategies to specifically tailor the unique context of those who struggle most, those who lack resources, those who drown in accountability pressures, those who see leadership turnover and teacher turnover and may not have a pool of teachers who could be mentors and have a lot of first-year teachers that need support. Those are the types of circumstances that we need the strategies that we're going to develop to work at. And so the planning for implementation, planning around the challenges, that the principles that are the highest priority in the district, those that really lead the highest priority schools in terms of need, it's going to be a focus of the implementation planning stage.
I
Go
want
ahead,
to add
Phoebe.
one more
Yes.
thing to that, Itai, before we hand it back, is one thing that is sort of inherent when we think about an audit is that there's one time where we're all looking at data and then we're done with it. And that is not something that happens in implementation planning. Part of implementation planning is also putting in checkpoints that say, at this point, we're going to look at our data, see where we are, see if we need to make some tweaks along the way, do some celebration because hopefully we've made some progress, but continue to make sure that we look at our data regularly so that it informs our next steps. So the implementation planning is also in that way a living sort of plan, right? Because you're going to continue to make tweaks as you learn new things from the next time that you look at your data.
Absolutely. And before we send it back, the format of today doesn't allow us for much engagement, right? Or back and forth kind of questions and answer with the people that are watching. And nevertheless, we very much value this engagement and the opportunity to directly speak to the community and to learn about Whitefield. And I feel like every time that we're doing that, and the most recent one was just last week when we spoke to your advisory committee, and we learned so much about the district and about what's important for people in terms of equality or equity in Whitefield. And I want you to know that if you weren't on the focus groups or if you are not on the co-interpretation, we would still very much appreciate any engagement and very much available and open for every question or anything that someone would like to share that I think would inform our work. So we really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you this evening.
Right. Thank you so much, Itai, Fannie, and Femi. We really appreciate you explaining the process that we're going through. And at this time, I would love to reintroduce Dr. Regina Lewis, who is conducting our culturally responsive training in Whitefield School District for our district staff and our board members. So I will turn it over to Dr. Lewis.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to speak to the community and let them know what we've been doing together. My background is in this work. I've been having my own business for well over 20 years now, Regina Speaking, LLC. And in many of the things that I do, one of them is definitely in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I work alongside many of the greats, such as Dr. Geneva Gay, who wrote the book on culturally responsive teaching. So we do a lot of work. I have an incredible team of people that come in and work with me with the district, and we have more. But more than just my credentials, I want you to know that I grew up in this area. I grew up in District 2, but I'm right down the street from Whitefield District 3. I raised my son in this area. I was in poverty at one point. I was a non-traditional student. I'm a person of color. And so a lot of the challenges that we are discussing and that AIR is really working on to assess and look at are firsthand experiences. So the work that I do comes with a lot of passion. So what I and my team are doing for the district is we're starting out with training for every single person that works in the district. And that's really important because if you're going to do this work, you have to, first of all, have a baseline. And that baseline is about bringing everyone so that we have common knowledge, common expectations, common definitions. And so this is where this SEED training comes in. SEED stands for Cultural Excellence, Ideas and Discussions. And it's 3 levels. Level 1 is really bringing about awareness. And so every single employee of the district has already gone through level 1. In level 1 training, they're looking at not just the fact that they have unconscious bias, meaning that they may be doing some things that are negatively impacting a student or a parent or maybe an employee. Not just realizing that that's what's taking place, but they get to look and examine where is their level of responsibility when it negatively impacts another person. So we can do all the research we want, we can do all the assessments, but if we do not take on personal responsibility, it doesn't move anywhere. This is the reason why we've been doing this work for all these years. It seems like once the training is gone, it's like the Band-Aid of change, nothing happens. Or only a special few people actually go through the training and not everyone understands it or is a part of it. You have to be intentional in this work. You have to be action-oriented. And this is what the district has decided to do. They have invested in this work. And it has been absolutely amazing. Like I said, we've gone through level 1 and already they're asking for level 2 and they are the ones. And when I say they, it's every participant has already identified areas that are blind spots that maybe have been unintentionally missed that they are willing to examine and work on. And we are going to take action steps towards what is it that we need to do alongside with all the other teams, and you are part of that team. Every parent, every student, everyone that's in the community is part of this team to be able to move it from where it is now to where it really needs to be so everyone is successful. So in level 2, which we're just getting ready to begin, so this was going to be a 3-year journey, but the district has asked that we continue on because they have the momentum and we can actually see things happen. So level 2 is about application. Okay, so you learn, number 1, what is unconscious bias? Number 2, what is the impact when your unconscious bias negatively impacts someone else? Where is your level of responsibility? And how do you have courageous conversations when someone is doing something wrong? So now you get somebody to speak up and speak out. But then you go into level 2, where we're going to know how to apply all this work. How do you actually realize, okay, I have unconscious bias, and how do I find it in my classroom? How do I make change in a positive direction so that everyone has the great opportunity to not just graduate, but be able to graduate from where they stand so that they can do what it is that they need to do. And then level 3 is ally advocacy. We are going to look from a system level. So everyone is going to learn how to have system thinking, because it's not just what an individual might be doing or not doing. It could be within the system itself. What are we doing with our policies, procedures, and practices? So we are going to become investigators of this work together so we can figure it out, so that we can confidently have a conversation with all of you. So that is the direction that we're going into. In the meantime, in between time, we have opportunities to be able to have cultural competency coaching, because not everybody understands culture and the impact of being from one culture or another culture, and having those types of conversations. We're going to have conversations about accountability, because it's going to have to start with the district first in order for the needle to move. They have taken on the responsibility on their side so that we can move forward. So I'm really excited to do this work with all of you. The reports that they are receiving, one, everyone gets a certificate for every level that they take. Number two, they are going to get 9 hours of professional development each. But when you do the math, we're talking about over 10,000 hours of this work, of diversity work. Then we are having collaborative and common definitions and understanding. Then data is actually collected that comes from everyone who's participating. So it's not prescribed. It's not something we're going to tell them what to do. They're going to discover for themselves. And then finally, we will look at a SWOT analysis to see where our strengths are, where the district's weaknesses are, as well as opportunities and the threats, so that they know where they're at. The work that I've done this far has received an A rating. That's important. And it comes from each one of them that's gone through the training and has spent their time to do this work. Everyone has gone through level 1, so that's an A+ for the district. I'm excited to work with all of you. If you have any comments or suggestions, or you feel like there's an area that should be discussed and trained on, I'd like to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis. Thank you for that overview. And I think the work that you're explaining is very important for us to continue to understand as a community of teachers and employees and our community of stakeholders. I know there are questions, and I want to thank some of you who sent some questions in last week. Last week, we sent out a Google form that was emailed out to staff and parents. And there are 3 questions that was submitted that I'm going to try to answer. And unfortunately, we don't have all the answers yet, but we're in that process of getting answers to some of the questions or maybe even concerns. And at the end of this, we'll give you an email for us to maybe have more dialogue or just further Q&A. But one of the questions, how can or will staff be held accountable for supporting this journey? And that is a good question. And you know, it's really about understanding who we are as a growing and ever-changing district. It's really about meeting the needs of our students to maximize their success. These are things that we are going to learn within the strategies that either AIR or some of the things that we were talking with Regina about. All of these things are new for us to grow and change together. And so it's really about going through this change together. There's going to be mistakes. There is going to be errors made. We will need to have grace. We will need grace from our community, from parents, and I think grace for each other to grow and learn through this process. And it's that teamwork. We are all here about how to maximize the learning for students. As a student myself, when I went through Whitefield School District 3, I want everyone's experience to be a positive one, to be an inspiration and a motivational one where they can leave and have the greatest success that they can possibly have based on their experience in Whitefield. We want that for every single student. And so this is not about finding a gotcha or setting up traps for people. This is really about how do we best serve our community of students as we move through really getting to know our communities, our neighborhoods. We understand the Whitefield region is changing and growing, sometimes at an exponential rate, it seems, and our community is evolving in different ways. And so for us to get out and learn the most about who we are and how to best address the concerns and issues and really maximize the learning of all students, that's what it's really about for us to move forward. Second question, what will be your measurements for success or failure of this journey? And I think this goes back to learning what the data is. What does the data tell us? We can't necessarily find where we want to go until we really know where we are. And once we've developed and uncovered some of those key areas within the focus groups, within the data that we'll receive from AIR, and then having conversations, we're going to build that together. That's not for one person to say, here is the ultimate goal. That's going to be the steering committee. That's going to be our focus groups. That's going to come from you as a community of Widefield. And we're really looking for that dialogue and making sure that we have the most voices in the room to develop those goals as we move forward through this. And then what is going to be changed in regard to curriculum? I know our curriculum process is something that we have developed through the relationship that we have with our Board of Education, also with our educational leaders. We're not looking to make draconian shifts within what we teach, but we're really looking to observe what is some of the things that we could be teaching that is in addition to, or what are some things that we need to think about as we are teaching certain topics, and hearing from our community to say, are there some gaps that you are filling that things are not mentioned within the curriculum that should be addressed? And again, this is not something that we have as a goal up front. We're not front loading this saying we're here just to add more curriculum. We're really here to learn about where our concerns are and where do we need to improve to maximize our student success. And if curriculum becomes part of that solution, then we'll bring curriculum in as part of the topic to address that problem with the solution of more curriculum. But these are things that we're going to learn along the way. These are concerns that we're willing to hear from all of our stakeholders. It's really about getting the most information that we can and then making the best decisions based on that information as we move forward. So those are the 3 questions that I have, Ms. Briggs, unless there are others that you know about that I don't.
I think that's good. Thank you, Mr. Duran. And as we kind of wrap this evening, I just want to thank again our AIR consultants who were here this evening with us, Dr. Lewis, to giving us kind of a brief overview of what this process is, and reminding everyone that, you know, we are on this journey together. We're learning, we're growing. As Mr. Duran said, we appreciate your grace, your patience, and your flexibility as we go through this. Please do send in any additional questions you have about anything we spoke about to info@wsd3.org. We want to continue this conversation and make sure that we can elevate all voices. And so we'll be updating our website. We have an Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, EDI webpage on wsd3.org. We will put this presentation on there, and then we will follow up next week with any questions that have come in to answer those as well. So I appreciate everybody watching us virtually tonight, and we hope you have a good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.